Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this planning meeting of Melton Borough Council. I am Councillor Alan Thwaites, the Chair of Planning, and I will be chairing this meeting. Just some housekeeping. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs any assistance. Please put your phones on silent during this meeting. Due to some technical difficulties, technical difficulties, let's watch it. This meeting will not be streamed on YouTube, but will be recorded and uploaded to the website after the meeting. Sorry, scrub that one then. Yeah, it is being streamed on YouTube. Thank you for making me do that in public now. Members speaking. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak and speak directly into the microphone in front of you. Please remember to turn it off once you have finished. Members voting will be by raised hands. I'd like to introduce those present this evening. The members this evening are, to my right, Councillor Mike Brown, substituting for Councillor Allnut, Councillor Ian Atherton, Siggy Atherton. I have apologies from Councillor Ronan Brown and Councillor Marilyn Gordon. To my left, I have Councillors James Mason, Councillor Margaret Glancy, Councillor Pat Cumbers, Councillor Sharon Butcher, who's substituting for Councillor Lee Higgins, and Councillor Don Pritchett. We have a team of officers present who are, to my left, the Assistant Director for Governance and Democracy, Clive Tobin. To my right, Planning Development Team Leader Mark Ketley, Planning Development Team Leader Chaya Pancholi, and Planning Officer Alex Coy. We also have our Democratic Services team present, assisting with the technology and taking the minutes. That's Adam Green and Sarah Evans. The apologies for absence, as I've just mentioned. I have apologies from Councillor Ronan Brown, who couldn't make it this evening. Councillor Higgins has sent an apology and Councillor Butcher has been appointed as substitute. Councillor Allnut is not able to attend and Councillor Brown is his substitute. We actually have 2 sets of minutes for this evening to complete. The first set of minutes is from the 16th of January meeting. Does anybody have any comments to make? Would somebody like to propose the minutes? Councillor Mason and Councillor Siggy Atherton to second. All those in favour of the minutes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And any abstentions? Yeah. So that's carried. I'll sign those. Second set of minutes is from the meeting on the Wednesday, the 5th of February. Does anybody have any comments? Read the minutes. In that case, can I have a proposer? Councillor Mason and a seconder, Councillor Siggy Atherton. All those in favour of the minutes? Okay, yeah, that's fast. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So that's the minutes. So declarations of interest. Members are to declare any interest as appropriate in respect of items to be considered at this meeting. No, I'll take that as none. Schedule of applications. Unfortunately, the application 21/00405/FUL, the Geldwen Snow Hill, Melton Mowbray, has been withdrawn from this meeting at the moment, but is hopefully will be put forward at the next planning meeting. So apologies if anybody hadn't got that message and is here to listen to that application. I don't see anybody fighting for the door, so I think the message got out there. So apologies for that, but it will come forward at the next meeting. So we'll move on to the only other application this evening, which is application 23/00999/FUL, the Red Lion, 2 Red Lion Street, Statham. And I will pass over to Alex for the presentation. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Chair. Presentation. The application seeks full planning permission for the change of use of the Red Lion Inn public house, its associated car park and outbuilding to residential dwellings. The site is located in the centre of Stathen, a service centre as allocated by policy SS2 of the local plan. The site will be accessed from the existing access off Red Lion Street. For background, the Red Lion Inn closed in 2017 and has not reopened since closing. Next slide, please. The proposal would involve the conversion of the Red Lion Inn and outbuilding to dwellings and the creation of 4 new dwellings in the car park area of the site, creating a total of 6 2 to 3 bedroom dwellings within the site. The proposal would see the provision of a new hard and soft landscaping scheme, boundary treatments, gardens, parking spaces and the retention of historic walling within the site. It should be noted that the amended plans were received in February. These were submitted to address clerical errors and non-material amendments, with the addition of a rebuttal statement from the applicant against the objections received. Therefore, reconsultation was not required on these documents. 2 more objections have been received since the publication of the report, but it is considered that they are already dealt with within the report and raise no further concerns than already those being raised. It should also be noted that there is a minor clerical error in the report at paragraph 8.2.23. This should state as detailed within 8.2.13 instead of 8.2.10. Next slide, please. This indicative site plan illustrates the location of the proposed dwellings within the site, with the blue area showing the new dwellings, the red area showing the conversion of the Red Lion Inn, and the yellow area showing the conversion of the existing outbuilding. Next slide, please. Looking at the principle of the development, the site is located within the limits of the development as detailed within policy H1 of the neighbourhood plan, and will be located within a service centre which is considered to be a village where windfall development is supported by policy SS2 of the local plan. The proposal would see the development of 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings, which is supported by policy H3 of the neighbourhood plan. As detailed within the report, the criteria of both SS3 and policy SS3 of the local plan and policy H2 of the neighbourhood plan, which deals with windfall development, is considered to be met, and therefore the principle of housing is considered acceptable, as detailed within 8.2 of the report. However, an additional matter for consideration in this application is the change of use of the Red Lion Inn as a community facility to a dwelling. As stated previously, the public house has been closed since 2017 and has not been used by the community since that date. The applicant has submitted a viability assessment that has been independently checked, and it is deemed that the reopening of the pub or the use of any other community facility is unviable, with the independent assessor stating costs being in the region of £1.2 million, including the sale price. In addition, there are other community facilities within the village, including another public house, the Plough Inn, the War Memorial Institute Village Hall, a convenience store, and a cafe/shop and garage. The Red Lion Inn has been registered as an asset of community value, otherwise known as an ACV, since 2018. However, this is considered to have limited weight when determining the application. I will go into further detail on this on the next slide. But for now, as detailed within the report, it is considered that the criteria of policy C7 of the local plan and policy CFA1 of the neighbourhood plan have been met, and therefore the conversion of the public house in principle is deemed acceptable. Next slide, please. For the benefit of the members and the public, an asset of community value is nominated land or buildings where the actual use furthers the social well-being or social interests of the local community. The regulations and procedures associated with an ACV are governed by the Assets of Community Value England Regulations 2012, which sits outside the planning arena. The primary purpose of an ACV listing is to afford the community a right to bid, but not a right to buy, and does not stop any plan application for the site coming forward. What the regulations do require is that the owner notifies the council if they wish to dispose or sell the ACV. This then triggers the disposal process, whereby the community can bid to buy the land/building within a set period of time. It should be noted that there is no requirement for the owner to accept the offers made by the community. In terms of material considerations, the ACV listing itself is considered to be a material consideration, but this is given limited weight for the purposes of making a decision on a plan application. And as the regulations and procedures such as marketing, offers made and the timescales sit outside the planning remit, they are not a material planning consideration when determining a plan application. Next slide, please. The proposed development will be designed to create a courtyard arrangement within the site, with the new dwellings being connected to one another, as shown towards the left of the plan. The scale of the development is considered to be acceptable given the size of the site and the number of dwellings proposed in comparison to the surrounding developments, and each plot would have a sufficient outdoor amenity space. Next slide, please. The full elevations and schematics can be found on the website. However, the visuals on the screen demonstrate how the development would look in situ and provide an illustrative view of the development. The proposed conversion of the Red Lion Inn would see the removal of the existing modern additions, restoring it to its original L-shaped form. In addition, all the windows and doors would be replaced with either timber and oak, which is considered to be a betterment than that of the existing. The existing outbuilding will be converted with the majority of the existing building enhanced and a small extension added to the front. This would be incorporating material details in keeping with the Red Lion Inn. The proposed new dwelling to the rear would utilise a varied roofline and have a material palette that would be in keeping with the surrounding area. Additional detailing would be added to provide a more traditional aesthetic, and timber carports would be used for plot 1 and plot 2. It is considered that the proposed design of the development will be in keeping with the existing buildings on the site and the surrounding area and buildings. Next slide, please. This map is here to help you understand the location of the heritage assets that have the potential to be impacted upon by the proposals. They particularly include the Grade 2 star listed Church of St Guflac, marked with the layout star, the Grade 2 listed buildings of the Old Rectory, Church Cottage and Manor House, marked with the blue circle, and the non-designated heritage assets of Statham Primary School, the beaches and the Red Lion Inn itself, marked with a pink square. The site is also within the conservation area. The proposed development is considered to have the potential to directly and indirectly impact upon the heritage assets and their settings. Following assessment of the applicant's heritage statement and the statement received by the Statham Community Benefit Society and consulting with the conservation officer, it is considered that the harm on these heritage assets, including the conservation area, will be considered less than substantial, given the scale of the development, materials used and the proposed conversions to the existing buildings. As members will have noted when visiting the site, it is currently vacant, overgrown and in deteriorating condition, and is considered to be having a negative impact upon the associated heritage assets in its current state. A significant number of objections have been submitted in regard to the alleged deliberate neglect and damage of the Red Lion Inn by the applicant. I have covered this in detail in the report at 8.4.6 onwards. An officer's opinion in that paragraph 209 of the MPPF is not engaged, as there is no evidence that there has been deliberate neglect and damage to the non-designated heritage asset. The consideration of the weighing up.
Please can we keep quiet and listen to the report? Thank you.
The consideration of the weighing up the public benefits over the harm to the heritage assets is finally balanced as stated within the report at 8.4.22. Overall, it has been considered due to the current state of the site and the unviability of restoring the Red Lion Inn as a public house, the redevelopment is considered to represent less than substantial harm to the associated heritage assets, but this is outweighed by the public benefits of redeveloping the site as stated within the report. Next slide, please. The site will be accessed from the existing vehicle access of Red Lion Street, which is considered to not be an intensification of the existing access with its previous extant use as the public house car park. 12 parking spaces have been incorporated into the design. It is acknowledged that some of these are tandem spaces. However, LCC Highways have raised no objections to the proposals. The site is located within Flood Zone 1. As detailed within the report, the current local plan policies map shows the site as being in Flood Zone 3B. This has been clarified with the planning policy team, stating that this was produced based on old Environment Agency modelling data and the revised strategic flood risk assessment, which was produced last year, shows the area as being in flood zone 1. In addition, both the LFFA and the Environment Agency have confirmed that the site is within flood zone 1. The proposed drainage strategy and flood risk assessment and the mitigations measures within them are considered acceptable, and the proposed development is not considered to impact upon flooding. The landscaping scheme and biodiversity enhancement plan provide improvements to the current site in terms of biodiversity and would see an overall net gain on site in comparison to existing tarmac car park. The plans have been amended to sufficiently reduce the impact upon residential amenity, specifically by reducing the ridge height of carports of plot 1 and 2 and removing a first floor window on plot 1. And officers are satisfied that the impact upon residential amenity is acceptable. Next slide, please. In summary, the application seeks planning permission for the residential use within an established residential area. The work required to reopen the Red Line Inn as a public house is unviable, and there are other community facilities within the area which can serve the community. The redevelopment is considered to represent less than substantial harm to the associated heritage assets, but this is outweighed by the public benefits of the redevelopment as set out in the report. There are no objections from technical consultees, including the local highway authority, and therefore it is recommended that the application is approved subject to conditions contained within section 10 of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, and thanks for a very thorough report. Can I ask any members if they have any questions for clarification from Alex on the report? Councillor Cumberth.
Chairman. Well, we have to take into account whether or not there's a housing need as well, and is there a proven housing need in that area? Because I think the local plan and the neighbourhood plan and the windfalls policy always require that need to go ahead. A proven need.
A proven need.
Yeah.
So the housing needs survey, which was conducted when the neighbourhood plan was produced, states that there is evidence of under occupancy, suggesting a need for smaller homes of 1 to 2 bedrooms, which would be suitable for residents needing to downsize. So that states that, and then the actual neighbourhood plan policy, the housing mix policy H3. Says that new housing development proposals should provide a mixture of housing types specifically to meet the identified local needs in Stathern. Priority will be given to dwellings of 3 bedrooms or fewer and to homes suitable for older people, including 2 and 3 bedroom bungalows.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alex. But aren't there sufficient numbers there? Because that counts as well. If there are sufficient numbers to meet what their local need.
In the summary of the future housing needs, there's no specific numbers outlined in that report.
I believe I have read somewhere that there is sufficient numbers there. I would think that should be a part of the consideration.
Can I ask where you've read that, if that's okay?
I'm no expert and I can't remember, but I've no doubt I could find it if I hunted, but I haven't got that time at the moment.
We can have a look at that while the other questions are coming and see if we can find that for you.
Councillor Butcher.
Just out of interest, when LCC Highways looked into, the access and the parking, do they do that work from their desk or do they go out and have a look?
So I don't know exactly what that officer has undertaken, but it is like they've gone out on site and also done a desk-based assessment. So I can't tell you the exact thing what they've done because I wasn't there at the time, but it is very likely they've gone out and have looked.
Councillor Siggy, Atherton.
Thank you, Chair. When we talked about, Councillor Cummins said about the need, they're already just building 75 houses in that village. I mean, how great is the need if they haven't already built 75 houses? And my concern is there's 75 houses being built and it's only a small primary school.
if you can maybe look at that while we're going through the other speakers or whatever, and I'm happy to call you back if you want to answer now.
quickly on that, is that the housing numbers within the local plan itself, they're a minimum for the areas, so they are a minimum, not a maximum.
Councillor Ian Atherton.
Thank you, Chair. So, two questions really. You've just mentioned that the housing need identified in the Statham local plan calls for 1-bedroom houses and bungalows. This plan is for 1 2-bedroom dwelling and 4 3-bedroom dwellings. So this, in and of itself, doesn't seem to meet that requirement. Also, in your introduction and in the document you've provided, you talk about a biodiversity improvement being apparent. I'd like a bit more definition of how you see that biodiversity improvement being manifested. In order to build these houses, a number of trees and bushes are going to have to be removed and not replaced. So it doesn't seem like an improvement to me. It seems to be the exact opposite.
Okay, yep. So in regards to the housing need question first, obviously, yeah, the housing need assessment does state about the need for 1 to 2-bedroom dwellings, but obviously the planning policy itself, which sits as part of the development plan, does state specifically it's acceptable to have 2 and 3-bedroom dwellings. So that's what's being used as part of the consideration of the application. In regards to the enhancements, biodiversity enhancements outlined in the report, so I'll just get the number up for you. So outlined in 8.7.4 of the report. So a biodiversity enhancement scheme that will include the additions of bat boxes, swift boxes, hedgehog tunnels. Also, it's accepted that there are trees being removed on site. However, they will be replaced on the scale that is outlined within the neighbourhood plan, which is, apologies, one moment, on a 2-for-1 basis. So they would be planted on a 2-for-1 basis.
I think there was also some comment. I mean, I think it was mainly around the flooding. They're saying that there was more soakaway area, green area, than there is in the car park as it is presently.
That's correct, yeah.
Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you, Chair. Could you put the slide up that shows the parking, please?
I believe that's slide 7. Right, back, sorry. Slide 7. That one, thank you very much.
Yeah, for number 2, the conversion of the existing single-storey building, you've got a tandem car parking space there.
That's correct.
From the latest site design, I think 28th of February or whatever it was on the portal, it doesn't look as if you can get 2 cars in, because if you see the car that's parked there now, the one on the portal doesn't seem to give you a car's length of building so you could put them both in.
So the plans have been assessed against the Leicestershire Highways Design Guide, and it is in accordance with those regulations of the guide, and there's been no objections raised by LCC Highways.
I mean, you've got your car. If it had the space, surely they would have shown you the 2 cars in tandem parked up rather than the one in no man's land. It doesn't on the portal. It doesn't look as if there's space for the length of a car sticking out. So that's my issue. Whether or not they've approved it or not,
okay.
That I would have expected to see to scale like the other parking, 2 of the tandem parking.
I think that's how the plan's been drawn on there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to congratulate you on a very well written report, Alex. I think it's extremely competent. Thank you. But just on a technical question, as you would expect, you spoke in your presentation on less than substantial harm. You know, and I know, and just for the benefit of refresh the committee's memory, that less than substantial harm is a pretty broad church. It's a pretty broad category of harm. And when we talk about the harm of substantial, you also include in your report that some of the harm in that category is midway, and some of it is at the upper end. That's a pretty damning harm within that category. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree that there is various levels of less than substantial harm, and it can be lower end, moderate, and higher end. As kind of discussed with the consultation with the conservation officer, there is different levels in association with this application. Some of them are moderate, and some of them are on the higher end. Specifically, the beaches, which is a non-designated heritage asset, and that has been weighed up in the assessment, and the balance outweighing the benefits of the site against that harm.
You would agree with me that at the higher end, it is a pretty substantial amount of harm within that category.
It's hard to exactly quantify it. I think that is hard to do. It's not gone over into the substantial harm, but yeah, I would say that on the upper end, it's still less than substantial, but it is on the upper end. It's hard to specifically quantify what it is.
Councillor Butcher.
Is there a reason why the council didn't use its powers to issue a 215 notice?
Yep. So obviously, we have a plan enforcement policy that's currently out and can be viewed. It is a proactive policy, and if a current application is live to try and redevelop that site, us as a council, our position is not to immediately take enforcement action, and that includes a 215 notice.
Councillor Siggy Atherton.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Alex. When we talk about less potential harm outweighs the benefit, the benefits to whom?
So that's the public benefits of redeveloping the site.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for clarification at this moment? Councillor Pat Cumbers.
Yes, sorry, Chair, but I really am quite concerned that we don't know what's in the local plan, the number, because as I recall, there are numbers given. I mean, I presume it can be reached if we have a short adjournment.
That can be found, but like I said to Councillor Atherton, it's those numbers are a minimum; they're not a maximum.
But they surely are sufficient to meet the local need. They wouldn't propose something if it wasn't enough.
But what I'm trying to say is that those numbers that are outlined in the local plan, I can get those up and come back to you on this. Is that is a minimum of housing for that area, and therefore because it's a service centre, it's acceptable to put windfall development there as well as what is being allocated in that site.
Yeah, I can understand it would be acceptable, especially if local people were in agreement. I can understand that. But do you say it's the minimum? It must surely be sufficient to reach the local need when it was written. I mean, the rest is bonus, isn't it? And not necessary.
Yeah. So policy SS2 itself. If I can just get that up for you, just one moment. So policy SS2 itself states that service centres and rural hubs will accommodate approximately 35% of the borough's housing residual requirement, which is 1,822 on a proportionate basis. This will be delivered by planning positively for the development of sites allocated within and adjoining the service centres and rural hubs by 2036, and by encouraging small-scale residential windfall development where it would represent sustainable development under policy SS1 above, or would enhance the sustainability of the community in accordance with the policy SS3 sustainable communities. Does that answer your question?
No, I'm afraid it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. In lots of ways, it will be a good thing and perhaps an improvement even. But you're not explaining to me where the actual need is, and those policies say that the development will only take place if there is the need. They don't have to take place unless it's a proven need, and you've not proven any need to.
I think respectfully, I think the policy that's where the proven need is it's within the policy. So the policy states that there is a residual requirement of 1,822, which will be accommodated within the service centres and rural hubs.
I'm hearing you, but I'm not believing you.
Sorry, your microphone's off, but yeah, can we something we don't believe? Yeah. Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you very much, Chair. Very, very interesting, Councillor Cumbers. Yeah, there isn't like a ceiling that says you get somewhere. If I'm correct, if these properties were 5-bedroomed houses, would we then have more scope to say that they don't fit with the need of policy of 2- and 3-bedroom houses?
That's correct, Chair. So it has been assessed against the other policies in the neighbourhood plan and the housing mix as well.
Any further questions for clarification? No? No. Thank you. In that case, then, thank you, Alex. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gordon.
Yes, now you're saying about having a bungalow and that, and the 2 to 3 bedrooms. Because I understand that some of the villages, I'm not sure about Stathen, but I understand with some of the villages that there's a lot of young people do have to leave the village where they've grown up, born and grown up, and because they can't afford the bigger houses. So I think we have to look at that, because I'm not sure how it stands in Stathen, but I do know in other villages there is a lot of young people that are having to leave that don't want to. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. I see no other indications, so I'd like to move on to the first of the speakers this evening, which is Parish Councillor Ken Bray from the Parish Council, talking against the application. Good evening, Mr. Bray, sorry, I do apologise. Thank you for coming along this evening. Just while you're settling yourself, you'll see in front of you the microphone, and there's a little face in the middle at the bottom. Once you press that, your microphone will come on. And once you start speaking, you'll have 3 minutes to talk. You'll get a warning 30 seconds from the end. If you could start closing at that point, that would be excellent. When you're ready, I don't think your microphone's on yet, but if you'd like to put it on, there you go. Please start when you're ready, and thank you for coming this evening.
Okay, thank you. The Stathen Parish Council strongly objects to this proposal, which is counter to many policies of the MPPF, the local plan, the neighbourhood plan, the adopted design guidance, you name it. This flawed and partisan report consistently admits conflicts with policies and then chooses to ignore or excuse them. Admitted flaws in the design, the dormers, are excused by reference to pre-design guide buildings. This committee should not accept such an approach, which simply perpetuates poor design. Other issues are ignored. The haphazard parking's been mentioned, tandem parking, parking in front of neighbours' houses, no parking for visitors at all. Pedestrians and vehicles share a common entrance with no separate exit in case of fire in the main building. There's no access to maintain the Rundlebeck, acknowledged as a flood risk. Waste bins seem to be a prominent central feature. The Neighbourhood Plan Housing Design Policy H5 is totally ignored despite numerous breaches. That would be unacceptable for any site, but crucially, this site is at the heart of the Statham Conservation Area, described in its listing as having important open areas, enhancing its character, with the older core of the village, this very spot, being particularly attractive. This proposal destroys this historic open centre, failing policy EN6. The report admits the harm, but bizarrely claims that the harm of the current state of the site is greater. How can that possibly be when the building state is temporary and changeable, whilst the development will be permanent and irredeemable? The car park could be cleared in a day. The officers state that their own unqualified views are preferable to those of the nationally renowned expert who provided the independent heritage assessment. Really, Alex? The building has been deliberately and obviously allowed to deteriorate. The weak justification from Marrons quotes only security issues and a minor break-in with no specific damage or cost attributed. It ignores the failure to keep it weatherproof and water damage clearly shown in the Everard Cole report and pictures. The site was and can be of great community use, and the pub and its car park are listed as assets of community value. This report admits that ACV status should be a material weight for planning and then chooses to ignore it. 5.11.6, the preamble to policy C7 states that in the case of public houses, it must be demonstrated that all reasonable efforts have been made to sell the property as a public house and that it is not economically viable. Quite the opposite has occurred and viability is disputed. You'll hear more later. Documentary evidence is self-serving, lacking in detail and solely based on a subjective and commercial viewpoint when there's a clear and sound community plan available. To allow this proposal would make a mockery of the local plan and the neighbourhood plan. You should refuse. And as a footnote, I've got time, you'll see from the planning history that 25 years ago, a similar proposal for this site was put forward. Those with long memories recall that similar arguments of non-viability and high refurbishment costs were used. That was refused and it was opened again within a year.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. If you'd like to stay there for a short while, I'll ask any members if they have any. Sorry, please, sorry, you've stayed there for a short while. Just to see if there's any members like to ask any questions for clarification. Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you. Can you, I went through the neighbourhood plan design policy and car parking.
Yeah.
Today, I haven't printed it off. Can you say there's numerous contraventions of that?
I mean, there are 13 points in the neighbourhood plan design, housing design policy, and it fails on 11 of them. I didn't have time to.
Yeah, well, in terms, can you be specific by this? You mentioned the dormer windows. Can you be specific?
Yeah, the dormer windows are in your policy, your design guidance, and that's excused by a neighbouring building in the vicinity, which is the same, which was built 10 years before.
Right.
If you do that, you'll never get your design better in the borough, because there was one like it 20 years ago. We'll keep that. So that's nonsense. I haven't brought the actual list with it, but it's all things about the quality of the building, the closeness, the bulk of it, because it's very overpowering, this design. I didn't have time to put it all in. It's very overpowering, this design. Fills up the space massively, and it will totally destroy that open aspect to the area.
Thank you.
Councillor Ian Atherton.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that concerns me is the potential risk of making flooding worse. Contrary to the opinions of our lords and masters at county, who are the so-called experts, who refer to a flood map plan that is now several years old, I understand that the stream behind the current car park where this development is planned does flood, yeah, albeit not necessarily at the car park. Could you explain to those present where the flooding does take place, how far away it is, and what the likely impact is of it getting worse?
It's about the quantity of water that comes down the hill and through that waterway. Leicestershire don't count it as a waterway until it's about half a mile down the road for some reason, but it is the main drain for the whole of the escarpment, and it floods towards the bottom of that site, and it floods into the beaches was mentioned. It floods their garden regularly, and it, depending how serious it is, it can back up all the way, and it floods across the road as well. So as I mentioned here, there doesn't seem to be any access to maintain it, which is not going to make it any better. So yes, it floods regularly, floods more towards the lower end, to be fair. It can flood. Sometimes it'll block a little bit further up and then it comes across the road and through the churchyard and ends up in the car park. But that's largely managed, only largely managed. So, is that enough?
Councillor Butcher.
You obviously know the village quite well. When we visited the site, the
Yes.
road was absolutely chock-a-block of cars.
Yes.
When you go past the drive to the site, at the top, is there farms or anything up there, or just houses?
There's houses round to the left, and then there's a track goes up into the countryside. As you will have also seen, there's a lot of rubbish on the road because it all washes down that track and onto it. And you'll also have seen that the houses opposite don't have any parking off-road, and the road itself is quite narrow. So given that they have to park somewhere, always park.
Yeah.
Which is why, particularly to me, the thing about there being nowhere for visitors to park
No visit, yeah.
is ridiculous. They're going to be outside on the street.
That's what I was thinking, like, because it was absolutely jammed when we visited. Where are the visitors going to park?
Yeah.
And then I was thinking if there's bigger traffic coming up there as well, that would even be worse.
Yeah, that's normal, I'm afraid.
Okay. Any other members?
I can answer the question on numbers that Mr. Coy was struggling with. The numbers in the development plan.
Chair, if I can just point out a point of order. The rules that allow public participation at these hearings are limited to making statements. Members' questions to people who make those statements are about clarification, not introducing new matters. So that wasn't covered by the objector, nor was traffic, nor was flooding in the original speech. And therefore, I think we're going further down that line of introducing new issues.
Parking and flooding were mentioned in my speech. You maybe weren't listening very carefully.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cumbers.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite, can I ask the resident if he knows what the numbers were in the local plan?
Well, we're asking questions for clarification. So it wasn't part of the presentation. So no, I'm afraid not. Any other? No. Just before I let you go, I will make a comment that the planning officers have to make a report based on very strict rules, and they do not put their own personal opinion in. They have very little room for manoeuvre. So I don't appreciate comments about an officer's
I think on the heritage
report.
thing, in his own words in the report, it actually says that he preferred their own view as opposed to the independent.
Yeah, I'm just making that point. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. In the next, I would like to call forward Sally Fagan from the Statham Community Benefit Society, who's an objector talking against. Thanks very much for coming this evening. Again, while you're settling down, you'll see the small face in the middle of the microphone. If you'd like to press that, and when you're ready, when you start speaking, you'll have 3 minutes as well, and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds if you could start closing. Thanks very much.
We would like to focus on 3 aspects: why the applicant's reports should be disregarded, why we believe the pub to be viable, why the marketing was not consistent with ACV policy. First, this application conflicts with multiple local plan policies. We will focus on local plan policy C7 and paragraph 209 of the NPPF. The applicant's viability reports are deeply flawed. We have challenged their assumptions, commissioned independent assessments, and produced a robust business plan. The planning officer's independent review is not truly independent. It was conducted by someone with links to the applicant's consultant and so should be disregarded. The applicant blames vandalism for the pub's deterioration, but the reality is clear. The damage is due to years of willful neglect. The conservation officer even states the site has been left to fall into a state of significant disrepair. As per paragraph 209 of the MPPF, deliberate neglect should not justify redevelopment. Applicants' references to refurbishment costs should be disregarded. Second, the Red Lion was a successful, profitable pub when the current owners took it over, yet within just 9 months, it went into insolvency without explanation. There is no evidence that the business is unviable, meaning that the application fails to meet policy C7 Part 2. Community-owned pubs have an outstanding success rate of 99 to 100%. Over 170 such pubs thrive in the UK today, demonstrating their viability, and they generate greater economic benefits for the council than housing. And we have the expertise to succeed. The claim Southern is adequately supplied with pubs ignores the fact that 2 pubs have coexisted in the village for years, both benefiting the community in different ways. With 74 new homes being built, demand will only grow. The Red Lion and its car park are registered assets of community value. There are no equivalent alternative amenities. The village needs that car park. The application also fails to meet policy C7 Part 1. Third, regarding the marketing of the Red Lion, a previous planning officer called it a sham sale. The pub was not on the market for a reasonable period. The applicant has failed to provide key details such as asking price history, viewings, and reasons for rejecting offers. 2 serious offers above market value were made with proof of funding, yet both were ignored. The planning process has been inconsistent and biased. Our documents have not received an equal level of assessment to those of the applicants. There is a better future for this site than the unnecessary development should be refused.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I ask if any members have any questions to clarify any of the points in the speech? Councillor Gordon.
Yes, you mentioned about the car park, but it is private. I mean, he's allowed it to be used for as long as it has been used. But I can't see how that can be an argument because it is a private car park.
The owners of the Red Lion prior to the current owners, if you remember from the site plan, we've got the school right next to it. We've got the play park right next to it. We've got the church right next to it. None of those have got car parking available. So the previous owners have had allowed parents dropping off children to use their car park to drop off. They allowed the church to use it particularly for functions like weddings, funerals, and that sort of thing. And we also used to hold very large events and still do try to do that, but we have no car parking facility right next to the play park anymore. So the car park was very, very important to the village. And you've already mentioned that it was chock-a-block with cars. We have nowhere else in the village to park cars going anywhere. If we had it as a community pub, then we would allow car parking. It would be an open car park.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any requests. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming this evening. So I'd like to talk to bring forward the final talk of this evening, which is Sachin Palmer, the Planning Director from Marans, the agent. Thank you very much for coming along this evening. Same instructions. There's the microphone there. You have the microphone. You have 3 minutes from when you start speaking, and I'll give you a 30-second warning. So please start closing at that time.
Thank you,
Thanks
Councillor.
very much.
Thank you, Councillor. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Hammond, have poured money into trying to make this pub work, but we have to be realistic here. The pub is unviable. With pubs and bar bankruptcies across the UK nearing their highest level in a decade, The council has carried out its own independent viability assessment. The council's viability expert concluded that the pub is unviable. When we first appraised the site, we compared it to successful gastropubs, which have an atmosphere that is accommodating to different types of people. These pubs offer a dining experience and trade sustainably by drawing for a much wider area due to a strong food offer. The Red Lion Inn can only draw custom locally, and that just isn't profitable. If we think about the soaring energy costs, food and drink increases, payroll costs, business rates, inflation, limited space, and having the quality of chefs to cook a standard of food, the figures just do not stack up. My client has not neglected the site. Since closure...
So can I just stop the clock there, please? If there's any more disruptions, whatever your thoughts, this applicant has as much right as everybody else to speak without being interrupted. So please, any more interruptions, and I'll have to change the way we're working. So please keep the noise down.
Thank you, Councillor. Since closure, the site has been subject to vandalism, and the building has been broken into and smashed up inside. There has been issues with squatters and drug users, which has been reported to the police. With no heating on, parts of the building have deteriorated and given away. Bad weather has further meant that the building is in a state of disrepair. Given that we are conserving the pub, it would clearly be to my client's advantage that the building was in a better order, as it is less to repair. The history of vandalism is by externals who are not bothered about obtaining consent. The test under national policy regarding deliberate neglect has not been engaged. Our firm does act for a number of pub operators. We see many issues faced by pubs when they are trying to expand and nearby neighbours will object. You simply cannot win. Everyone currently objecting wants to retain a pub, but then people will also complain about associated noise, disturbance, comings and goings if it expands. Our scheme is centred around rejuvenating the Red Lion Inn and preserving its heritage significance. Overall, we understand that the village is unhappy about a nostalgic pub being lost. However, this scheme would preserve the heritage asset and ensure it is a landmark for future generations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We hope members can resolve to grant planning permission.
Thank you.
In line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Would any members like to ask any questions for Councillor Gordon?
Yes. How long did your applicants run the pub for? Because I understand somebody said it was 9 months. If I heard it correctly, I just want to ask you.
In terms of the exact timescales, we were instructed after a first planning application. So I believe they did run it for a couple of years, but I need to. I'd have to. So you know, I think my client there is saying 9 months. So
yeah. Because if it is only 9 months, is that long enough? To know if it's viable, because obviously...
Karen, sorry, we'll be back for the debate. I mean, we're just asking questions for clarification.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any further, Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. You know, I know that you spent your whole 3 minutes talking about the viability of the pub rather than the details of the actual application and development. So I'll ask you about the viability. If, as we have been told, offers were made at or in excess of a reasonable market price, wouldn't the most straightforward solution for your clients to have been to accept one of those offers, because then they wouldn't have had to deal with the issue of viability? Isn't it rather the case that viability isn't the issue here, but where the option for the most profit is?
Thank you, Councillor. Again, I think in terms of what I've spoken about, we're speaking about the planning application put forward here today. You know, in terms of viability, that's a matter that's been assessed by viability experts. you know, my client here today is we want to bring a resolution to this site, and we want to bring forward sustainable development. And you know, in terms of this site's been vacant for a significant period of time, the amount of money that you'd have to spend just to get the building to a reasonable state, and then to furnish it, to get it to a standard, and then have a reasonable offer. You know, we've mentioned here that you know, there's going to be some more houses built in the area. Well, you know, to have that level of custom to sustainably trade, you know, it's a difficult market for all businesses at the moment. You know, we're talking about, you know, a lot of parking problems. Well, a successful pub trading, it's going to have significant implications in terms of comings and goings, and you know, use of car park, noise disturbance. So, you know, there's substantial operational impact as a result of that.
Karen.
Just follow up on that. I mean, I just want to be clear, because I've got the report and the comments and the objections to go on, but they tell me that offers have been made and rejected. Is that correct or not correct?
I understand.
Excuse me. And are those offers made on the basis of the property as it currently stands?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm unaware of any recent offers since Marans have been instructed. I'm aware that there was a previous moratorium period a number of years ago where an actual offer was not made. I believe there was some interest, but there was no actual firm offer. This is all contained within our viability report, that was the original viability report. We carried out an additional addendum. So yeah, in simple terms, there's been no offers.
Councillor Cumbers.
I'm not sure if this question is appropriate, but I'll ask it. Yeah, in the report, it talks about 1.2 million being the cost of, do you know what that consists of? That is a price, isn't it? An estimated price plus an estimate of putting things right. Do you know what those two figures were or are?
Thank you, Councillor. So the figures are made up of acquiring the site, and then a bulk of the money is split into different categories of refurbishment works. This includes refurbishing the interior, making structural repairs with a part of the roof caved in, refitting out things like the kitchen, getting it to we always took a line of taking the median value in terms of being fairly reasonable with the figures and making sure that costing is open to critique. That's contained in a QS costings, which were independently assessed. And those are just some of the, you know, with these types of buildings, especially dealing with a heritage asset, there will always be hidden costs, which probably aren't even included in those figures. So that's the pure list of items that would be required to get it to a state where you could start to trade. It doesn't then include the quality of some of the fittings and finishings you'd want to make it an attractive proposition, you know. And always there's going to be some abnormals and other factors, you know, things like planting, landscaping, you know, delineating the car park, making it ready for use. So those were the kind of minimum kind of costings required.
Sorry. They're both estimates, but your professional estimates. Can you just give us what sort of prices sort of floating around as the actual cost as it stands?
Well, you know, I don't have all the reports to hand right now. It's obviously, you know, an application with a significant number of reports submitted, which you have seen. So in terms of the exact figures from memory, I believe there was around £500,000 worth of works required just to get it to a standard. I think that is contained.
100 grand.
That is detailed specifically within reports. Hopefully, you know, through you, Chair, you know, officers can look at that information, which has all been publicly available and listed.
Okay, we may look at that.
I've not learnt what I was looking for, but I can understand it's not easy.
Thank you. Councillor Seguí.
Thank you, Chair. You had 3 minutes to talk about the benefits of that conversion, the buildings that would bring, but we spent 3 minutes listening about a pub and other pubs and things like that. Can you tell me the benefits, the buildings that you proposing would bring to the community? Because at the moment, I don't understand what we're talking about, pubs and different pubs, rather than what benefits.
As
you're-
we said, it's questions for clarification. Unfortunately, yeah. Okay, I'll allow this one, but
Thank
really
you.
we're just for clarification normally.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to share, respectfully share with members, 3 minutes is quite tight in terms of the things to cover, and there are parts here I've written. Essentially, there's so many matters here to consider. In terms of the general design, it's something that we've done a lot of work on actually, which is
Don't think
informed.
you asked about design. You asked about the benefit to the community. So
Yeah, in terms-
please
so-
restrict yourself to answering the question that was asked.
So
Yeah.
the key benefits and in terms of public benefits is right now when you pass the site, you're looking at a derelict pub with an outbuilding, which is a historic outbuilding, which is in a pretty poor way. And when you glimpse that view straight through the middle, you are looking at a we can say how great this space is. It is a car park. It's a vacant car park, which it's not an important view. So one of the key public benefits of our scheme is we would rejuvenate the pub. We would take out all the elements which detract from it, and it's had some pretty poor extensions in the past. We would take out the front extension, which is you can see from the public realm, with a flat roof, which is it completely contrasts with the historic significance of the pub. There's a horrible extension at the back with a barn end, which would be removed. We've also got the outbuilding, which would restore, rejuvenate, add an extension to it, and at the front you'd have these fantastic buildings which have heritage significance in white render, and in the backdrop then you'd have a neatly aligned row of houses which are actually, you've got a building hierarchy where you've got the main prominent
I think
red lion,
we're straying away
an
again. What's the
outbuilding.
benefit to the community?
and that's so that's the public benefit is rejuvenating that view.
Councillor Ian Atherton.
Thank you, Chair, and please stop me if I kind of wander into areas that we shouldn't. But I'd like some clarification, please, on around the willful damage or not, as you suggest. So, in a rebuttal submitted by yourself in that regard, you state that the premises were closed, they were secured, and security measures were put in place. However, the property was subject then to vandalism, etc., on a number of occasions, which suggests that the security measures weren't that good. You mentioned today, and it's the first time I've heard of it, squatters, which again suggests that the security measures were not too good, and that the roof collapsed due to the weather. Roofs don't collapse just due to the weather without there being some underlying cause, a leak or such like, which any self-respecting security firm would have reported to you for remedial action, which appears not to have been taken. So the point of clarification then, please, is just what were the security measures in place, because they seem to have been not very effective.
Well, the security measures are Harris fencing and secure entry. There's concrete blocks which have been placed outside to stop people getting in. In terms of the roof, there's an area of the snug which has always had a bit of a problem, and when that started to leak, when it was vacant, that part of the roof caved away, and due to bad weather, that's got worse over time. I visited the building on a number of occasions, and it's quite clear the damage caused by vandals. In terms of the councillor, some of your comments regarding the NPPF test, we're looking to rejuvenate the building as part of the scheme.
Okay, so just to confirm then, the security measures were to block the car park, which had been in common use for the church and for the school run, and to lock the building and to walk away. That was the security measures.
Sorry, councillor. There's Harris fencing. There's in terms of security, I believe there might be some CCTV, but in terms of security in the site, it's to make sure it's private land. People can't get onto it. That's
so there was no security firm that did regular checks to keep an eye on the property to make sure it was still waterproof, etc. It was just locked up.
Sorry, through you, Chair, I can ask the client that question, whether that is a material consideration of planning application. I'm looking at legal and through officers and through you, Chair.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we've established the point, and that any further wouldn't actually increase that point. I don't think at this moment in time. Sorry, Councillor Butcher.
You mentioned the viability of the pub for most of your speech, but is it not true that there is a lot of pubs that are really viable in the Beaver and the villages around Melton? So I don't think it's just the fact that it's a pub. It's, when there's plenty that are really viable.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I think, there's a significant number of objections. The heart of this case relates to everyone wants a pub. So, which is why my speech centred around the viability of the pub. In terms of other villages, every site is site specific. Sometimes there's factors in terms of physically how much of the building. It's quite a small pub. It isn't. We're not putting masses of housing there. Even the 3-bed units, they're pretty tight. They're small units, starter homes. So it comes down to each site's characteristics, whether they've got enough space to have that draw, whether they've got a different type of offer. I live in Ashby. I'm happy to travel to Woodhouse Eaves, take my wife and have and enjoy food there because it's got that draw. It's got something about it. So every type of site has to, businesses have to think ahead in terms of what, if it's just reliant on the local village. And however many houses there are, just a drinking pub, I think that's clear in all our reports. It's got to have that food offer. And once you say you want a food offer, you've got to have the standard kitchen, you've got to have the chefs, you've got to offer something different. And to get that draw from outside the village is not an easy task. And that's something it's something that even really reputable, award-winning owners of pubs, which I know the previous owners of operators of Red Line were, and they struggle to turn a profit. So, I'm not a viability expert, but that's from the viability experts that we use. That's their advice to me. And I believe that's what the council's own independent expert has also concluded.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Yeah, thank you. I'm no viability expert either. But just to turn to the costs, you did mention the costs of putting the site back in good order, I believe. Just a question, why do you think there's such a disparity between the first report, and it is the applicant's report, and the independent report in the order of costs for putting the building back in good order?
Thank you, Councillor. Just through you, Chair. I don't understand the discrepancy. I believe we did cost, unless the difference is adding the value of buying the site. So the costings we've never had a change in our costings. So the costings we've had is done by a QS, which is then appended to our viability experts report. An addendum was carried out, and those are the documents that have never changed. It may be that the addition to that costing is then adding the land value and the value to buy the site. So that may be where there's a difference in the figure. But yeah, there's never been a change in terms of how we've never amended or revised the documents in terms of viability addendum and QS costings.
No, I accept that, then, but in the original reports, one was given one figure of between, let's just say, between 100,000 and 300,000. Another report, it was something like 750,000. Well, that's a massive discrepancy between the two. And I note in the report that the independent value is based on the Building Cost Information Service figures. Would you think that gives the independent report more credence?
Thank you, Councillor. I think if there's a massive discrepancy, that probably is adding the value of buying the land. So that's my response to that.
I can assure you that it's not, because I have.
Okay.
In fact, I'll give the game away. I used to be a QS, so
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't quite catch that.
I used to be a quantity surveyor, so I worked it through, and there is a massive discrepancy. And I just wondered why, because it does affect the decision making on how much money has to be put into the viability to make it completely viable.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you've got any comment on that. But if you haven't, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm unaware which report would have a discrepancy. For example, if a planning statement says it differently, I'm unaware. But as you know, I've reviewed every submission that we made. You know, the viability report, addendum report, and QS costings are the same. We've never amended that work. In terms of how the independent council's independent assessor works, you know, they may have used different information just to make sure that, you know, our figures have been you know, robustly tested. And like I said at the start, we always made sure that our costings were carried out by QS, and we took a very kind of median, kind of low end. You know, things are pretty expensive in terms of the market right now, and that's across the whole board for all developers.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Thank you very much for your time this evening, and thank you very much. Just like to turn the microphone off.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to suggest to councillors, would you like to take a 5-minute break before we move into debate? Because I think the debate might take a short while. So if we take a 5-minute break, but just a reminder to all of the committee members that you are still in the meeting, so please do not discuss with anybody outside of this meeting that's not public. So if we just take a 5 minutes break, and so please come back at 7:20, yeah, just after 1:15. Okay, if we can start taking up seats again, please. Thank you, everyone. We'll bring this meeting back to order. So listen to the speakers. We now move into debate. We have a report that gives a recommendation to accept. Would anybody like to start the debate with their thoughts? Don't be shy. Councillor Cumbers.
Ask if Alex has got any more information. And I do, as a conservation officer, I do have enormous respect for him. Thank you.
Just to be clear, I'm not a conservation officer. I'm the planning officer. Just to make that very clear. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So the housing need that's stipulated within the local plan for Stathern is 75 dwellings. But what it does state within the local plan in paragraph 4.2.4 of the local plan, I will read this out verbatim. The annual housing requirement steps up from 170 dwellings per annum for the period to 2021 to 245 dwellings per annum for the period to 2026 and to 320 per annum thereafter. These stepped requirements are the minimum number of dwellings that should be provided in the relevant period, and all stakeholders involved in the delivery of housing should play their part in seeking to exceed the requirements by bringing forward development in accordance with the plan policies as a whole.
But that's not referring to Stathern then, is it?
That's the plan as a whole. So that is the whole. That's the whole borough.
Yeah, and I noticed as well in the report that when the plan was done, that there was a lot of under occupancy, you know, so that's another indication, you know, that additional properties might not have been needed or are not needed.
Okay, I think we can leave that at the moment. So would anybody like to? Councillor Gordon, thank you.
Yes, I'm a little bit perturbed about the length of time that the applicant had run the pub, if it was for 9 months, because at the end of the day, a business person, they usually delve into everything before they take on a business, and I can't see that 9 months, because really he would look at it and take that business on with a view that it would be profitable. So he would have delved into a lot of areas to do with that business. So I'm just a little bit perturbed that it only lasted 9 months.
I can understand where you're going on the viability front, but as we on many occasions, we're a planning department, have to stick within the planning boundaries. So what happened at that point of time isn't irrelevant, but it's we have to sort of keep to the planning conditions, really. Councillor Butcher.
My concern's the parking, visitors parking, and it looks very tight on the build as well. I mean, if you live in a village, not snobbery or anything, but you've got quite big cars or 4x4s. The bigger your cars get, the less space you're going to have to park.
Yeah, again, and I understand, and as you know, my position, I can't make a comment either way. But the only position, as we've known on several occasions, Leicester Highways, the County Council Highways Department, have made no objections, and therefore, whilst we can take account to it, we can't use that in any form of refusal decision.
Yeah, I get that, but it still doesn't take away the problem for the villagers that are living there. And that's why I asked if they'd done the decision from the desk or if they'd actually visited, because I think if they'd have visited, they'd probably have seen what we've seen.
Okay. Councillor Siggy Atherton.
My concern is the sustainability within the village. The village has a very small school. We already got 75 houses being built extra. So that is, when generous, maybe 75 children joining that school, plus what, 6 dwellings to add on it. Where are they all going to go?
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I want to come back on the issue of viability, but within the context of planning policies, and on that basis, I'm looking at paragraph 8.2.11 of the report, which refers to planning policy C7 and policy CF-A1 of the Statham Neighbourhood Plan. That's just to set the scene over viability. What I'm struggling with, I mean, I understand what the applicant is saying in terms of they've reached a view that the public house isn't viable for a range of reasons they've set out. But in these policies, the bit that I particularly find myself drawn to is, you know, we should support it only where it can be proven. And item B in this paragraph is the existing community facility is no longer economically viable or able to be supported by the community. Such viability and support includes fundraising and volunteering by residents and others. Now, I have to say, and I make no criticism in saying this, but I'm unclear from the presentations from objectors as to the extent to which a viable proposition has been put forward, because quite rightly, it's partly about purchasing the red line, but it's also about what the business plan and what the support within the community to actually make it viable. Because viability isn't just about, do you sell enough pints? I can't drink pints anymore, so I say that rather wistfully. It's about whether the community is willing to invest in that facility going forward sufficiently for it to be viable. And I can't see in any of the information I've been given here tonight anything that tells me whether that is the case or not. If it is the case, then in accordance with these policies, we shouldn't be supporting the application. So I find myself in a bit of a dilemma as to whether I can actually make a decision on the application. I accept much of the report, and I would echo the comments from my colleague Councillor Mason. I think it is an excellent report. I know that some areas people will take exception to, but I understand judgment over planning matters is based on the policies as set out, and it does come down to an issue of fine judgment sometimes. But I think without an understanding as to whether there is truly a viable proposition from the community as an alternative, I find myself unable to actually support the application. I'd be inclined to say we need more information around that, and we should be deferring a decision rather than taking one tonight. Thank you.
Just before I go to Councillor Pritchett, I mean, there is one thing to put that within all planning, there's a different thing, different weights, and they're carrying different weights. And unfortunately, or whichever way you want to look at it, the viability is ranked fairly low or light within that. But that's just to set that scene. Councillor Pritchett. Yeah.
Starter for 10, and then I'll listen further to the debate. Intensity design. It seems to me that's the battleground on this one. Looking at it, a very good report, Balance. I've heard nothing from the objectors that actually quantify and describe the balance of what they don't like in the design. I've not heard or seen any criticism of the impact on the properties on Water Lane. There's clear open ground behind where the new build is going to be. In respect of dormer windows, my 1970s dormer bungalow, yes, is ugly, but in a well-constructed country house, they do look nice. Not a problem. And I've just checked on the phone, see if my memory serves me right, that they're prominent in the Davidson's design of the 75 houses, you know, as a feature, of which they are contributing Section 106 monies to the local school and the Beaver High School. So it comes, you know, and I've looked at and have known appeals for this sort of thing, and the way the inspectors have looked at it, and I don't particularly see at this stage a strong case if it was turned down on personally on design. What I'm coming to, which I don't like, and I'll come back to this later, is in the design that's been accepted. If you go to the council's supplementary planning document on design for properties in the Vale of Beaver, it looks at the mix between the dark red brick and the stone, and you get of a different age and time and whether the wealth have impacted on it, and it comes down to, I'll pick up on this later, of adding some variety into at least two properties, of adding some, if it's robust enough these days in construction, is adding some of the local stone features in it, so it's not just a wall of red brick. But I'll come back to that. But that's my opening comments.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of comments to make, and introduce some fresh comments into the debate. But first, I'd like to deal with the parking. I've serious concerns, like everyone else, with the parking on site. I noticed that visitor parking doesn't apply, and I think Leicester County Council only are concerned with visitor parking with a housing estate of 10 or more houses thereafter, and then they only allow a quarter parking space per 10. So I think that's a bit of a sledgehammer approach that are taken by Leicester, and I think given the amount of parking or the amount of cars that I saw on the streets, and I travel through Stathern regularly. I come to this forum through Stathern, and it is pretty chocker with cars. I do think that should not apply in this case. However, we are stuck with policy, and policy is policy, and I'll leave it at that, and I'll leave it for others to debate it. But if it's all right with you, Chair, just to follow on and perhaps introduce another element into the debate. I was struck by something that Mr. Bray said regarding previous applications on this site, and this, what I say, comes with a health warning. You can't always read across because policies change, the way policies are interpreted, and the way that national policies are put forward. So it comes with a health warning. But I'd just like to turn to something which is said, and this leads me into where I need to be. I'd just like to read, and if you'll bear with me, something that Lord Justice Mann said in a case some years ago. An important reason why previous decisions are capable of being material in like cases, and this may not be a like case, but it does bear comparison. In a like manner, so there is consistency, and consistency is everything, I think. Consistency in our approach, contractors' approach, developers' approach. And it's important for the purpose of securing public confidence. And so I think it's necessary for us to bear in mind previous decisions. They may not be the same, and you may not be able to read across into them, but it does bear a look at why they was turned down in the first place, and that is on the heritage aspect. Now, heritage is interpreted in different ways, and that is why I asked Alex at the beginning about the substantial harm and less than substantial harm. It's a very, very broad category introduced by English Heritage, I believe, and Historic England. Because when these houses are built, they're built. That's it. There's no going back. they're built. And if we pass it today, it will be built. But what I'd just like to look at is some of the issues that's borne out from Alex's report and indeed the Conservation Officer's report. The Conservation Officer is quite clear what he has done. He has said, I think he's approved this reluctantly. I can't say that because he's not in the room. However, he's approved on the basis that the site is dilapidated, whether it's willful or not. I'm not interested. I take it all at face value, and therefore he's taken that and it tidies that site up. But let's be clear: when it's built, it's built. And when you look at some of the comments associated with that, and this is why I wanted to talk about substantial harm, less than substantial harm, that some of these buildings suffer less than substantial harm, but at the upper end, so they'll never be the same again. You'll never get that vista. You'll never get that viewpoint again, because is because of the buildings on the car park. And I just want to make that point. And there's one very telling, well, the number of telling paragraphs in here, and most of it's centered on a property called the Beeches. I can't recall seeing the Beeches, but obviously the Beeches was a prominent feature. And it virtually says that if it had been a listed building, the Beeches, it would have suffered substantial harm. Now, substantial harm is right at the top of the category. You can't get any more damage than substantial harm. I just want the committee to bear that in mind, that whatever decision we make tonight will affect that surrounding area in many, many ways, particularly with substantial harm being taken into account. I just want to throw that into debate because we've talked about viability, we've talked about car parking, but not the surrounding buildings and the conservation area itself. I just want to bring that in.
Thank you. Councillor Glancy.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank Alex for a very comprehensive report, but I've been listening to the debate tonight and also from the objectors and also from the proposer and the person acting for the client. From all that, I can deduce that the applicants ran the pub for 9 months, then it closed. It was left unoccupied and seems to have been allowed to get into disrepair. But however that happened, that's where it is now. They've also had offers above the asking price, I believe, from the conversations that we've heard and also from the reports. And up there, trawling through the planning portal, I found that out. Now, when we did the local plan, we went through every village and decided, because I was part of the local plan in the good old days, looking at every village, decided how they ranked for service centres, for rural hubs, etc. And Stathern was deemed to be a service centre because it had 2 pubs, a school, and I think a small delicatessen shop from memory. So now we're looking at removing one of the sustainability features of that particular village, potentially if we agree to this application. But also in the mix, we agreed it would have 75 new homes as part of its sustainability. Now, to me, that seems a bit cockeyed because, yes, it's okay, it's sustainable, it's got 2 pubs. Oh, but by the way, we're going to give it 75 houses and take a pub away. It just doesn't add up to me. I think it's really cockeyed. It's unclear on the viability of the public house and the difference in the amount needed to re-establish that particular pub. I've sort of questioned that, and I know my colleague sitting next to me has queried all that. But ultimately, it's about the design and the over-intensification and the car parking, which is completely inadequate for where that particular site is. It's a shoehorn effect, and that's something I've never ever been very, very sort of keen on. So I really can't, to be honest, I really can't support this unless I hear more debate to persuade me otherwise.
Councillor Ian Atherton.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I'd just like to come back to the location, if I may. We're quite clear in the local plan about where new builds should take place, and policy C1 talks about prime sites for housing allocations. This isn't one of those listed. It then talks about reserve sites. Again, this site isn't one of those listed. The Stathern, Appendix 1 to our Melton local plan talks about supported development in Stathern itself. And this isn't one of the places listed in Stat 2 of that appendix for Stathern. If you look at the Stathern neighbourhood plan, paragraph or section 4.4 talks about housing mix. And this may be the numbers that Councillor Clumbers was looking for earlier on. Albeit it goes back to 2011, it talks about a total of 18 new properties in the village. We've already committed to 72 or more, 75. So we're way in excess of that. So I would argue that this proposal it also non-compliant with policy H3 of the Stathern neighbourhood plan, just on pure location, nothing more, nothing less. In addition to that, there are two things to do with climate change that we should consider these days. One is in the Melton local plan, policy EN8, which this proposal doesn't address at all, and therefore, to my mind, is non-compliant. And the other is in the Stathern neighbourhood plan, policy TR3, which asks for each new build to have an EV vehicle charging point. And I've seen no mention of any of those in the plan in front of me. I may have missed it, but I don't see it. And therefore, to me, this plan is not compliant with those two policies either. So I know we're mid-debate, but I would propose that we reject the application as not compliant with the policies that I've just listed. And I'm quite happy to go through them again if nobody's made any notes.
Are you proposing a rejection, or you that just mid-debate?
If it's appropriate now, I propose a rejection based on those non-compliance with the policies I listed.
Councillor Mason?
If we go to, I agree with Councillor Atherton, but if we go for that, I think I would like to introduce as a reason for refusal the harm to the heritage of the conservation area and the buildings in and around that site. I'm sorry, I don't know. I can't remember what policy that is. So I look to my. I didn't want to come predetermined. I'm sorry.
Councillor Pritchett, and then I'll come.
One of the documents quoted was 2011, the neighbourhood plan. Did you say going all the way back to 2011?
I did. The number of houses quoted in the current Stathern neighbourhood plan uses surveys and such like from 2011, but the plan itself is still valid.
Well, the local plan deals with allocated sites and windfall, and this comes within the windfall, and that principle that you're saying about a ceiling, it could apply to a lot of places, but that's 2011, so I think there needs to be a bit of a ruling on that one.
So can I just come back on that very quickly, Alan? The Stathern neighbourhood plan is for 2020 to 2036, albeit it does quote figures from 2011. So the plan itself is still valid. I accept the figures might be a bit old, and we've far exceeded those numbers already.
Apologies, Councillor Glancy, I missed you earlier.
I was going to second the motion to refuse, but as my colleague's already done it, that's fine.
I don't think he actually seconded it. I don't think he asked for an amendment to it.
totally agree with that element. I think we do need the conservation element on there. It's harm to the conservation area, listed buildings and heritage. So I think that should be included as well.
Chair, just commenting on the reference to provision 7.3 and policy TR3 of the Stalin local plan. What it actually says is residential development involving new build or changes of use of one dwelling or more should provide 7 kilowatt cabling or better if feasible to the most practical point in the home to facilitate subsequent installation of a home electric vehicle charging point. So it's not must be provided when built, it's have the cabling. So I'm not saying there's not a matter you can take into account, but of course you need to take into account what it actually says rather than a suggestion that it must have a charging point when built. I think it's
okay. So, but I think, do you just want to go through the two main objections at the moment and any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think just following on from the legal officer's comment there in relation to policy TR3, obviously correct insofar as the policy requires the capability of providing home EV charging points, but I think to go one stage further than that, the actual provision of EV charging points would come through building regulation requirements. So I think, Chair, I would urge caution in terms of a potential refusal reason based on policy TR3, because ultimately it would be dealt with through other legislation outside of the planning arena. I think the two other potential refusal reasons, which are based on the balance of heritage impacts versus public benefit, and linked to policy N13 of the local plan. Clearly, Alex's report presents the balance and exercise that's been undertaken, and it is a very finely balanced recommendation in that respect, Chair. We appreciate that members, it is within their gift to arrive at a different conclusion given how finely balanced that particular exercise has been. In terms of the other potential or proposed refusal reason around housing requirements, I think what I would do is reiterate what Alex had said previously. Now, please view this in the context that this isn't my role to try and influence members' decision tonight, but it is my role ultimately to advise on the defensibility of refusal reasons should the applicant take this to appeal, and the potential of a cost award against the authority in that respect as well. And I think, to reiterate the point that Alex has made on multiple occasions already this evening, the housing requirements identified in the local plan, both in terms of Stathern as a village and also the borough of Melton as a whole, they are minimum requirements. And paragraph 4.2.4 of the plan, which Alex read out verbatim earlier this evening, is very clear on that point, consistent with national guidance. The housing requirements are minimums. That particular paragraph of the local plan is clear that stakeholders, which includes ourselves as the local planning authority, will work together to exceed those requirements, and hence the allowance for windfall sites such as this to come forward. So again, Chair, I would urge caution on the potential refusal reason linked to housing need, given the potential issues that we would have in defending that at appeal. Thank you.
Councillor Atherton, Ian Atherton, would you like to restate your reasons for objection?
Well, I can add to them.
Well, please carry on.
I'd just like to draw members' attention then to policy H2 of the Stathern local plan, which is all about windfall sites. And it does say small residential development proposals will be supported subject to proposal meeting all relevant blah, blah, blah. Where practical, all the following criteria is within the limits of development of the village of Stathern, which it is, helps to meet the identified housing requirements for the parish, which it doesn't, provides safe vehicular pedestrian access without causing unacceptable impacts that can't be mitigated, which it doesn't, is in keeping with the character of the area, which it probably isn't, has roof heights limited to those of the surrounding buildings, which it does, does not result in an unacceptable loss of amenity for neighbouring occupiers by reason of loss of privacy, loss of daylight, visual intrusion or noise, which it doesn't, retains existing important natural boundaries such as trees, hedges and streams, which it doesn't, though the plan does give some mitigation to the last one. So there's lots of subtleties, I think, in why this plan is not compliant, and I stand by the fact that it's a plan for a number of dwellings that is not in any of the recognised areas for development in either the Melton local plan or the Staithen neighbourhood plan, either in terms of a predefined site or in terms of a windfall site. So I think on balance, I'd like to stay with my proposal. If it gets voted down, then so be it.
But I believe the proposal is on this at this moment in time to reject on the basis of harm to heritage versus the public interest, and that's the major part. There is no other part within there that we feel we can defend it at appeal.
Yeah, Chair, I think from hearing Councillor Atherton's latest suggestion, it appears a conflict with policy H2 of the local plan and the neighbourhood plan, and the criteria within that is the suggested refusal reason. Is that correct, Councillor Atherton?
That coupled with all the other kind of location related reasons, but yes.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Atherton. I mean, certainly the conflict with the criteria in policy H2, I think, is a different proposition to a refusal reason on meeting housing requirements and the minimum numbers that I explained previously. You know, I think H2 is a positively worded policy. It allows for windfall sites to come forward, provided that the criteria within it are satisfied. I think what you're suggesting is that you accept that the site could come forward under policy H2, but you feel that there is conflict with the criteria within that policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Gordon, remembering we're talking about this proposal at this moment in time, so please relate to that.
Yeah, it's just something that I thought you could add to it. What about the car parking situation on the on-street parking? If that could come into it some way?
And as we said before, we can add it, but we know painfully that it because of the county council highways, no objection to it, that it wouldn't be something that we could actually defend at appeal. Any Councillor Cumbers?
Just to say that highways, it's just advice. It's not like some of the other stuff which we've really got to follow. And yeah, coming back to this minimum number, a minimum, if we just ignored that, what we do need, we need everywhere to reach that minimum number. But it doesn't mean to say that any of them have got to go above. That's my view anyway.
Yeah, just to qualify your comment on, yes, no, we don't have to. It's not the rule of law. They're not the Lord Masters. But unfortunately, the planning appeals take their advice above most things, and that being on flooding or highways, fortunately or unfortunately. But that's we all have our own opinion on that one. Councillor Cumbers.
If I can just come back to that, to highways, I wouldn't be saying that if I hadn't seen them highways opinion ignored and going to appeal and the council, the decision being upheld. And so I've seen an example. So that's why I would say it.
Councillor Glancy.
Can I just recap, please, from the officers? What are the actual reasons for refusal? Because we've taken some out, now we've put some in. So can we have a little bit of clarity before we continue a little bit further, please, in the debate? Because the ones that I think I've picked up so far is the neighbourhood plan H2, and also our local plan? I can't remember. EN8, was it on the local plan? Do we know? I think it'd be helpful if we had some clarity on it, please. But also, I would like to make sure there's something in there about over intensification and the impact, the negative impact on heritage assets.
Yeah, Chair, if I can clarify my understanding of the situation as it stands at the moment, and we are working up the actual wording of refusal reasons from the notes that we're taking at the moment. I think we have two potential refusal reasons that have been put forward, and they are firstly impact on both designated and non-designated heritage assets in the vicinity of the site that would result in a level of harm that would not be outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme, and that would be contrary to the NPPF and policy EN 13 of the local plan. And the second potential refusal reason is the conflict with policy H2 of the neighbourhood plan, which allows for windfall sites such as this to come forward in principle, provided the criteria within the policy is satisfied, which I think Councillor Atherton has suggested they are not satisfied in this particular case.
Okay, Councillor Cumbers.
Maybe we need some legal advice as well, but whatever officers are recommending, in the end, the decision is ours, is it not?
Absolutely, and I think that's what we're debating.
Yeah, the recommendations are already in the report, but this is a motion to refuse. So obviously it's a matter of the person who's proposing, the member who's proposing that motion, to be satisfied as to the wording. Obviously we can advise on the nature of that wording, but say it's not us as officers who confirm that final wording. And it's once you've got something before you, obviously that's what you vote upon, and we will assist you in the wording of that. But say it has to be something that the proposer and seconder are happy with before a vote can be taken.
So we're waiting just to put the wording together for agreement by Councillor Atherton and Councillor Glancy. Yeah. Okay, we'll just take a 5-minute break, just while we make sure we've got the wording correct for the proposal, before we come back for the vote on the proposal. So again, if we at 2 minutes to 8, if we can come back to then. Thank you very much. Please, again, we're still in meeting, so please no discussion outside of the people involved. Okay, if we can call this meeting back to order, please. I think we have the reasons. We just want to, I think Alex just wants to make one clarification for the wording. So, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I just would like to clarify, Councillor Mason, if that's okay with yourself, is that obviously you've said about the less substantial harm to the heritage assets. Is that all of the heritage assets that have been detailed in my report, or is that certain specific heritage assets?
All the assets that's detailed in your report where you say there is less substantial harm to it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Oh, sorry.
Alex, could you put in? I'm sorry to be a pain, but could you put in the level of harm within the lesser substantial harm? I mean, the upper end and lower end. Is that possible?
So, which ones do you believe? Sorry, I just need to be quite specific on this. So, which ones do you believe have the upper end, and which one do you believe are the moderate?
Everything that's in your report, because you do put in there sort of medium and upper end. You do quantify it in the report.
Okay, that's fine. I will have a look at that now.
Chair, just in terms of process, since it's Councillor Atherton's proposal and Councillor Glancy's seconder, they've got to be happy with anything that's added to it. So that's key when this is resolved. And I'm obviously Councillor Mason's perfectly entitled to propose further amendment to that, but it needs to go through that process.
Yeah, I understand that, and we just need to listen to the proposal first before I can go back to ask them for their acceptance. So, Mark, if you'd like to carry on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you to members and members of the public for your patience. There's obviously a lot to capture here and to translate into a meaningful pair of refusal reasons. So the wording of the first proposed refusal reason we have down as, in the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposal is not in keeping with the character of the area and would, if approved, result in the over-provision of additional dwellings that are not needed in the village of Stathern. Furthermore, the proposal fails to secure sufficient suitable on-site parking to ensure that residents and their visitors can safely park. The proposal will therefore lead to additional on-street parking on Red Lion Street, which is a narrow historic lane with an inadequate width footway and would have an unacceptable impact on the safety and movement of traffic and pedestrians on the highway network. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy H2, parts B, C, D and F of the Stathern Neighbourhood Plan. And
That's okay so far?
Yeah.
Was that part okay with Councillor Glancy? You accept that?
Yes, the part.
The first part?
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you, Chair. Do you not also have to quote the parent policy in the local plan?
Can you be specific on the particular policy, Councillor Pritchett?
No, because I'm not going to support this one. In terms of incorrect windfall site, I'm not leaning towards it. But you've just quoted a policy there. I need to know what's it all about, the policy, and should we not also be quoting the local plan parent policy as well?
I mean, Chair, I mean, I'll read policy H2 of the neighbourhood plan verbatim while we're waiting for Alex to finalise the wording of the second refusal reason. But so to quote policy H2, it states that small residential development proposals will be supported subject to proposals meeting all relevant requirements set out in other policies in this plan, i.e. the neighbourhood plan, and where such a development meets, where practical, all of the following criteria. A, is within the limits to development of the village of Stathern, or the residential development meets the circumstances set out in paragraph 80 of the National Plan and Policy Framework. B, helps to meet the identified housing requirement for the parish. C, provide safe vehicular and pedestrian access without causing unacceptable impacts that cannot be mitigated. D, is in keeping with the character of the area. E, has roof heights limited to those of the surrounding buildings. F, does not result in an unacceptable loss of amenity for neighbouring occupiers by reason of loss of privacy, loss of daylight, visual intrusion or noise. And finally, G, retains existing important natural boundaries such as trees, hedges and streams. So the proposal from Councillor Atherton is that it's in conflict with B, C, D and F.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Councillor Atherton.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just having a look at the Melton local plan in relation to the its relationship with the neighbourhood plan. And paragraph 1.8 of the Melton plan does talk about what are neighbourhood plans and how do they relate to the local plan. And it does say right at the end that the policies and proposals included in the plan, in this case, the neighbourhood plan, will then be used in determining planning applications in that area. My reading of that is the neighbourhood plan takes precedence over the Melton plan.
Chair, the legal position is that both are documents of equal status in the development plan. If we're suggesting there's a conflict between the two, we'd need to identify what that conflict is and then apply the statutory provision, which generally says that the latter of the documents takes precedence. But I'm not sure what point's being made, whether it's seeking to rely on or distinguish from something that's in our plan, in which case we'd love to look at it in more detail. If that's not the case, then this development plan, the neighbourhood plan is a valid development plan document, and therefore without conflict, there's no need to inquire further.
Yeah, no, Chris, my point was in relation to Councillor Pritchard's plan observation as to whether we needed to refer to the Melton plan. And I don't believe we do, because the neighbourhood plan is the more recent, and therefore in this case I think that's the one we need to rely on.
Yeah, and I don't think you're talking about a conflict there.
Yeah,
either.
provided there's no one's trying to identify a conflict and needing to resolve that, then we can rely on that provision in the Statham plan.
Councillor Pritchard.
The point of the question was, I'm struggling personally to see the thread that you're going on, how you can avoid you looking at the balance of policy D1 and the supplementary guidance about intensity of development, etc., etc. So that was the reason for the question.
So if we can go for the, what I can say is the major part of the objection, yeah. So
yeah. So the proposed second reason for refusal, suggested wording is that in the opinion of the local planning authority, the development would result in less than substantial harm to the associated designated heritage assets and non-designated heritage assets. Specifically, less than substantial harm at the lower end to the Church of St Guthlac, the Red Lion Inn and the conservation area. Less than substantial harm at the intermediate level to the old rectory and church cottage, and less than substantial harm at the higher level to the beaches due to the design and over-intensification, which would not be outweighed by the public benefits of the redevelopment of the site, contrary to policy EN 13 of the Melton Local Plan and paragraph 215 of the NPPF 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for putting that together. Councillor Ian Atherton, are you in agreement with that?
I have no objections to the words as read out. Thank you.
Councillor Glancy, are you in agreement with that?
Quite happy, thank you.
And we've already
Could
established
could we
that.
please have that as the first reason for refusal? And then the second one would be a conflict with H2.
Councillor Ian Atherton is okay with that. And Councillor Mason, we already checked that you were happy with that, the amendments that as you put in forward. So therefore, we have the proposal as read. I'm not going to read it out again. I'd like to take that towards the vote as a proposal to reject the application. All those in favour of the proposal as read? Those against? And I make that's no abstentions. Therefore, the application is refused. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all in. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for your time, your effort, and everything that was put into this. And I'll close the meeting at 8:14.